Hello, you wonderful people. In this video, we're going to do a crash course of how to take your Next.js project and hook it up to Strapi, an amazing headless CMS. I did in the past create a full crash course that you could check out somewhere here in the link in the description below. But in this video, we're going to start with a brand new project where we're going to focus more importantly on how to take our front end and connect it to our Strapi backend that we are all going to create from scratch ourselves. And on the screen here, you could see our starter template, which has the landing page here. You could see all the cool components that we're going to have that are going to pull data from our Strapi application. And the most important part, that it's all going to be done dynamically. We're also going to learn how to create the top navigation and the footer. And as I mentioned before, all of our data is going to live inside our Strapi application. So if you take a look at our content manager, our global data will have our top navigation and our footer data. Our home page is going to be our landing page. So you could see we have our hero section, we have our section component, we have our content items component, and so on. And all of these components will be dynamically generated inside our Next.js application. For instance, if you take a look here, if I add a hero section, our front end will display the hero section. And our content editor could display these sections in any order as many times as they want because it is going to be generated dynamically. And the secret to that, and this is what we're going to cover in this tutorial, if we take a look in our application, I'm going to show you how to load your data. But more importantly, we're going to see how we could create a block renderer component that will allow us to create a dynamic renderer that will render each specific section if it is in our response. And as a bonus, I'm going to show you how to create dynamic pages, which means that based on the slug provided, for instance, if we take a look in our Strapi application under pages, we have about page, our company page, our features page. So whenever someone in our application goes to a specific page, and currently we've not integrated that functionality, but I'll show you how to do based on the data provided. We will fetch that data, use our block renderer to render our section and populate all the components. But more importantly, our page will be populated dynamically. So we don't have to hard code about page, contacts page, whatever page we designate in Strapi in our page collection type is going to be populated dynamically here in our Next.js application. So I hope you're excited to get this project started, and I'm looking forward to see you in the next section where I'm going to show you how to set up this starter Next.js template so we could hit the ground running. All right, you wonderful people, let's get started. I'm going to put a link in the description below in this video for where to find this starting repo, and this is the only starting code we need because the rest we're going to build ourselves from scratch. So let's go ahead and clone this. You could go to my GitHub at paulbraslavsky/next-strapi-template-starter-code. The link will be in the description though. To make it easy, click the code button and go ahead and copy the command. I'm using GitHub CLI to make things simple, but you could just use this and do git clone. But I'm going to stick with the GitHub CLI. Make sure you copy the code, and inside my terminal, I'm going to go ahead and paste the command, and I'm going to add a little space, and I'm going to call this front end and click enter. This is going to go ahead and clone everything. So now we're going to cd into our front end and run yarn to install all the amazing dependencies. Once that's done, you should be able to run yarn dev to start the project. When the project starts, and by the way, look at this, I have many projects open, so it's going to open for me in localhost 3002, but for you it's probably going to be 3000. And once you open it, you should see this project where you see all of our code, all of our section, and all of this is hard-coded, but we're going to work on getting that data dynamically from Strapi to populate our top navigation, all of our hero section components that we'll create ourselves in Strapi, and our footer here. We're also eventually going to take a look how to create these dynamic pages, which is currently not implemented, but I'm going to show you how to do that. And finally, let's take a look in code. Once we open our project, this is basically our starter template. There's nothing special about it, except we just have our predefined components that are already pre-made for you. There's nothing special about them. They're just basic React components where we display our data. If we jump to our app folder and take a look at our layout, this is where we're going to start. I'm going to show you how to dynamically get the data from our Strapi instance to populate our navbar component and our footer that we're going to dive into more detail as we get there. Next, we're going to jump to our page.tsx file. Here right now, we just have our components listed and we are hard coding the data here below. But the goal for us, like I demonstrated at the beginning of the video, we're going to see how we could create a block renderer that's going to dynamically render our sections based on what sections we are using in the Strapi. And I'm going to show you how to do that in this tutorial. And finally, here we take a look at our slug dynamic route. I'm going to show you how to create dynamic pages in Strapi. So instead of having to hard code the pages here, we're going to be able to add the pages in Strapi and they're going to automatically get populated inside our Next.js application, something that we didn't do yet here, but this is why you are here for this tutorial. So with that being said, let's take a look how we could set up our local instance of Strapi. See you in the next part. So here I navigated to strapi.io and we could go ahead and copy this command here, but you could also click the get started button that's going to take you to the documentation, and documentation is our friend. We're going to go to the quick start guide, and if you scroll down, it's going to show the command that we need to run the installation. And here, as you could see, we just need to create npx create strapi at latest. I'm going to go ahead and copy this command, and back in my terminal, I'm going to cd into the root of the folder, and I'm going to paste the command, and we're going to call this backend because this is going to be our backend. It's going to go ahead and start the installation process. Click yes. It's going to do all of its magical things once it's done. And I forgot to use the quick start flag. So here you could set either custom or quick start. Go ahead, set quick start. That's going to set up your Strapi instance with a SQLite database, which is perfectly fine for what we are doing. Once everything is installed, it's going to start the application for you. Once the application starts, you're going to be greeted with this form. Go ahead and create your first admin user. I'm going to say Paul Bratz, and I'm going to put my email, paul.bratzlavsky@strapi.io. Yes, I work at Strapi. Secure password, monkey1234. A very secure password indeed. And make sure you confirm your password because it's very important. And click enter. And you're going to be greeted with our admin area, which we're going to come back to in a second because we're going to take a look how to organize our Next.js content in order to present it in our landing page. So for now, let me stop my Strapi project, navigate back to frontend, and I'm going to run yarn dev to start my Next.js project. Let's open our project up. And here we have our initial page, our landing page. So what we're going to do, we're actually going to start by creating the top navigation and then our footer. So let me go ahead and take a little screenshot here so I could kind of talk about what we're going to do. So taking a look at our navigation here, what we're going to do, we're going to break this down into one component. And that component is going to have few sections. It's going to have a link, which is going to take us home. If we click on it, then it's going to have many links depending on what page that you click and select. And then we're going to have a call to action button. So we're going to jump running right into it. We're going to go into our Strapi application and create a page to store this initial top navigation information. Once we create our data structure in our Strapi application, we're going to take a look how to go ahead and load it right into our Next.js application to close the loop from creating our content and collection types in Strapi and rendering that data on our Next.js application. So let's jump back into our Strapi admin and get started. And here we are inside our Strapi admin. We're going to jump into this content type builder tab, and we're going to create a single type, and we're going to give it a name global. And this is going to store our data for our top navigation and our footer. I'm going to click continue, and we're just going to add a title, which will be text. Click add another field. Let's click text again. And we're going to select long text, and this is going to be description, and we're going to click finish and save. Now I'm going to go inside my content manager, and here you can see that we have a global page. I'm going to call it global, and I'm going to say is responsible for the top nav and footer. And I'm going to click save and publish. And I want to show you something cool. If I go to settings under users permissions, roles, go to public, you're going to see this global API endpoint, which is what we just created. We're going to click on find, and here it's going to show us that if we make a get request to that endpoint, I'm going to go ahead and click save, we should see our data. So I'm going to do that right now. And here I am in Insomnia, and I'm going to make a API call to our API/global. And when I click send, notice here we are getting our data from our endpoint, which is pretty awesome. So we now are able to get our title and description from our global setting page, which is kind of cool. It literally took us 2 minutes and we already have a working API. So now let's add the rest of the fields. Navigating into our front-end project, let's go into source, go to components, and let's take a look at the nav bar. We're going to expand this data and we could see all the things that we want to return. Our top navigation is going to consist of our logo link, our nav links to our different pages, and our call to action. So let's think about how we could structure this data in Strapi. And I'm going to start with the top navigation. So let's do that. In Strapi, we have this concept of components that allows you to create blocks of reusable data. For instance, we have our logo link, we have our regular links, we have this get started, which is also a link. So let's create some components to represent our logo link and represent our regular links that we could reuse in our code base. So navigating to our content manager, we're going to go to content type builder and we're going to create a new component. Our first component, we're going to call logo link. Let's create our category. We're going to put it into elements. So go ahead and click create elements category, click continue. And our logo link is going to have 3 different items. First, it's going to be an image. So let's select the image and call it image. We're going to say it's a single type. If you go to advanced settings, you could only select to allow images files only and not any of the other types. Back to basic settings. Let's click add another field. This is going to be a text, and this is going to be the text of our link. Let's add another field. We're also going to select text, and we're going to call it href, which is going to be the link to our path. Click finish and save. So now we created a Strapi component to represent this link. Next, we're going to take a look at the links. So let's go ahead and create a link component. So in content type builder, let's create new component. We're going to call it a link. Let's add it to our elements category, click continue, and we're going to have 3 fields. The first one, we're going to select text, and we're going to say href to represent the path. Let's add another field. It's going to be text. We are going to call it text, which is going to be the label for our link. And finally, let's click add another field, and we're going to set this Boolean. And we're going to say, is it an external link or local? And we're going to go to advanced settings. And for default value, we're going to say false. Let's go back to basic settings, make sure everything is good, and click finish. So now we created our link component. So let's click save. Now that we have our building blocks, we could go ahead and create our top nav component. We could either do it through create new component, or we could go back to our global page, click add another field, and we're going to say component. We are going to call it top nav. Let's create a new category, and this is going to be called layout. Because it doesn't exist, let's go ahead, click create, and let's click configure component. And let's call this top nav. It's going to be a single component, and click add your first field to the component. Our first field, we're going to slide to components, and we're going to say use existing component and click select. And we're going to select our logo link. This is going to represent our logo link here in our application. We're going to call it logo link, and it's going to be a single component. Let's now click add another field. Again, we're going to click on components, use existing component. We're going to select a component, and this is going to be a repeatable component because we have many links on our website, and we're going to select our link component. And here we're going to call it link. Let's click add another field. And finally, we want to add this button for our call to action. So let's navigate back to component. Let's click use existing component. Let's select our component. Again, it's going to be our link component that we created. And we're going to call it CTA, and it's going to be a single component. Let's click finish and save. Now here you could see our global page has our title, description, and has a component that represents our top navigation. So now we could go ahead and add those items inside our content manager. So clicking on content manager, we go to global. Notice now we have this area where we could add our top navigation. Let's click the plus icon. We're going to start with the logo link. For text, I'm going to say Strapify. For href, it's going to link to home. And now let's add an image. I'm going to click add new asset, browse files. And on my desktop, I have this logo SVG. I'm going to go ahead and click open and upload and click finish. So now that we have our top navigation, let's go ahead to links, and we're going to add 3 links. We're going to say home link here. We're going to call it home. Is it external? No. Let's add another entry. We're going to say navigate to /about, and we're going to call it about. And let's add another link, and we are going to call this blog. So let's link to our blog, and the name is going to be blog, and click save. And finally, let's add our call to action. And here we're going to do HTTPS, which is an external link to strapi.io. And here we're just going to say check out Strapi. And this is going to be external link. So let's click true and click save. Now we have our global page that has our top navigation. So now if we take a look at Insomnia and click send, wait a second, we did add data, but we're not getting any of our additional data. That's because we need to tell Strapi the data that we want to populate, so we're not overfetching or underfetching. So let's do that. And the easiest way to do that is to use our populate and filtering. If you're new to Strapi, you could check out this blog post, Demystifying Strapi's Populate and Filtering, that you could find on our website, which walks you through all the things that you need to know to make sense of how populate and filtering works in Strapi. This is based on an amazing talk done by Richard, who works here at Strapi. So you could search for Interactive Query Builder Strapi, and you will find this in our docs. And if you navigate down, and here you're going to see an example of what populate and filtering looks like. We're going to delete this, and I'm going to show you what we're going to do. And here in the endpoint, just make sure that you end API global, because that's the endpoint that we want to get. If we take a look at our content manager and take a look at our data, we want to populate our top navigation, our links, and our CTA button. So let's see how we could do that. So here I'm going to paste the code snippet, and I'll walk you through it. In Strapi, we have to say populate and the items that we want to populate. For instance, in our case, we want to populate the top navigation, and inside of top navigation, we want to populate our logo link, tell Strapi what fields from the image we want to return, and we do the same thing for the link and the CTA. And here we get this big query string. Don't worry if it's scary. We're going to simplify this process in a second, but I just want to show you that if I paste this inside Insomnia, and paste and click send. Notice now that we're getting all of our data, including our top navigation, our logo link, our links, and our call to action. Now we know that our endpoint works. Let's take a look how we could pull this data inside our top navigation component in Next.js. So inside our Next.js project, let's navigate to source, components, and find the navbar.tsx file. And here inside the loader data, we have our hard-coded data that we return. We're going to go ahead and delete this because we're going to pull that data from our Strapi API. Don't worry if TypeScript complains. If you take a look inside the lib folder, you're going to see a generic fetch function that I created. Basically, what this does, it allows us to fetch our data from Strapi. All it takes is a URL. If there's an auth token, it checks if the auth token provided. This is something that I use in my other tutorials, so we're not going to really worry about that. And then it runs a flatten attribute function that flattens the response to make it more manageable. And you could see all those inside the utils folder. But we are going to use this fetch to get our data from Strapi. So back in our navbar, because this is Next.js 14, soon to be 15, we are able to use React Server Components. By specifying a sync function, we're able to directly call a function and get our data from an external API. So that's what we're going to do. We are going to import our fetch data function that we're going to use. Then we're going to define our path. We want to hit the API global endpoint that we know that works. We just tested it via Insomnia. And then we want to pull in get Strapi URL function. So I'm going to make sure to import it here at the top. And get Strapi URL, if you take a look at utils, all it does, it just pulls in our Strapi based URL from our environmental variable or uses our predefined URL here. Next, we're going to predefine our query that we want to pass, and we're going to use the QS library. So let's go ahead and import QS from QS. This is already installed. You could find it inside the package.json here. You could see QS. And what QS does, it allows you to pass your query as an object and it will stringify it. You could learn more on their website or their Node NPM package. So here you could see the package, and basically what you're able to do, you're able to provide an object with a query string, and it's going to return. Here you could provide a object and it will convert it into a query string, similar to what we saw here in our interactive query builder, where it's returning this string. So instead of having to type the string manually, we're using the QS library to help us do that. So go ahead and copy this previous query that we constructed, and back in VS Code, let's go ahead and paste it in. And now that we have our query, let's construct a URL path that we could use. So we're going to say const URL, and it's going to equal to new URL, which is going to take the path and the base URL. Then we're going to append our query. And finally, we're going to go ahead and return our data. So we're going to use that fetch data function that I showed you in our lib here. And that's going to go ahead and pull our Strapi data, and we're going to return it. So if we navigate down here in our code, we're getting that data from our loader. We're checking if it's null or not. If we have the data, we go ahead and we're going to pass it to our top navigation component. So let's check this out if it works. So I already have my Strapi instance running. So let me go ahead and cd into our frontend project and run yarn dev to restart our Next.js application. Now, once everything starts, let's go ahead and navigate to localhost. And here you could see we're getting our data from our Strapi admin. The issue with the image, let's take a look and see how we could fix it. So if we take a look in our VS Code, we are getting our logo inside this disclosed client. So let's go ahead and check it out, see what could be the issue. And here we are using a regular Next image. So if you take a look under components, we have a component that I created for you called Strapi image, which will basically get the Strapi URL and will append it to our image path to make sure that everything works. So all we have to do is inside our disclosure client, instead of using Next.js image, we're going to import Strapi image component and go ahead and replace the Next.js image with our Strapi component here. And now the warning should go away. And if we go back to our application and refresh, notice that our image works. This is awesome. We now have a dynamic way to set our top navigation from Strapi. So in Strapi, if we wanted to add another page, we could go add another entry. I'm just going to say, let's navigate to test path. We're going to call it test. And when I click save, and now in our create next app, if we do Command Shift R to reload, notice we have our navigation. So because our website is statically built, you do need to do Command Shift R to fetch the new data. And in the future, we will be able to use a hook that will, every time we change our content in Strapi, we will be able to revalidate our data, which will update our statically built site. But for now, we know that our application works and we're able to generate our top navigation dynamically, which is really cool. So next, let's move on to building our footer and being able to pull our footer data, which will basically use the same steps that we used for our top navigation. So see you in the next part. Now, just a quick clarification. If you were wondering how come everything worked so nicely when we imported our data from Strapi to our Next.js project, if you took a look earlier inside our hard-coded data and you saw the structure that our Next.js application expected, we actually named the things accordingly within our Strapi instance. For instance, when we're creating our Strapi top nav component, we called it top nav, spelled exactly this way. We created our logo link and we added our text, our href, and our image. So our naming inside our Strapi matches what the data of our Next.js application expects. But if you were building this yourself, you would model your data first, get the API response, and that will dictate how to consume that data in your front-end application. But I just wanted to clarify that just in case you were wondering.